Ask Professor Thakur now.
Thank you, Professor Vajpayee. I think when he was speaking, I was looking at one of the presenters, Varun, who is going to speak on religion and spirituality today. And there's a group in our own larger group working on these kind of things. I can see Shiva around, and a lot of people are around working on this. And also, I must assure, and good that you brought this issue, that literature, this group takes very seriously, art and painting, everything. Other day we had a major discussion on cinema and realism, emerging trends in India, in Indian film industry. We invited Shalini Vats, who is part of our group, and she has acted in recent Netflix big hit, Secret Games. So we have initiated a new channel, and maybe we'll have some kind of collaborations very soon. So I think since the day I have interacted with Professor Vajpayee, I was just not finding any reason why we missed him for so long. Because he has so many projects that he mentioned the other day, which is very common to what we have been doing since long. I think this is just a kind of a chance that we missed him. And we missed him in the sense that we have been following him, but the interaction was missing somehow. Thank you very much for that. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to basically, in 10 minutes time, kind of persuade the creative theory group that we need to take the idea of capitalism very seriously, which is not my field basically. I'm coming to this idea through religion, my work on religion. And I think it's an area which we can't ignore anymore. There are many serious issues emerging before us, and I can count on them. The technology issue, how artificial intelligence and robotics is going to transform us fundamentally. The ecological issues, the kind of democracy that we are going to have, and we definitely need new theories to explain what is happening to democracy. I think the transformation that that's happening today could be called, I'm not sure, the ontic mutation. Are we witnessing an ontic mutation? A mutation, after that probably we will not be able to explain things with the same categories and concepts that we have been doing till now. I will just take capitalism as an example to make this larger argument. And that's the challenge before the creative theory and the younger generation of the creative theory. What's happening to capitalism? We all know that there's a deep crisis, and whether the crisis is over or not, there's a big debate on that. And I broadly agree with Professor Prabhat Patnaik, who argues that despite all claims by big economists that we are out of the crisis, we are not actually out of it, and the crisis is going to impact us much more deeply. Let me have a philosophical journey of capitalism, and that's what I want to argue, that the crisis of capitalism at this moment is not merely of the political economy crisis, it is a deep philosophical crisis, which probably capitalism would not be able to overcome. So if we remember why was capitalism as a means of production became so powerful, I think two philosophers, Locke and Adam Smith, they justified capitalism. And the main ground for justification was common good. I don't want to repeat the argument, this audience must be knowing about it, that how Locke suggested that if you make private property as an institution, probably the resource available to humanity will be much more. And he added a kind of ethical note with that you should not appropriate more than you require, which was kind of violated gradually. And it was violated, now it is violated to the extent that we cannot say that it is the same capitalism. Probably earlier it was not violated to that extent. Now that ethics is almost completely over. The second argument that Adam Smith brought was that probably it will, the market, which the argument that became more popular was invisible hand of market and ruthless hand of market, and all that we have been talking about Adam Smith. But he has another book called The Moral Sentiments, and there he gives an ethical idea that, well, if there is a problem in the production process and the state intervenes, makes some laws, if the laws are in favor of the working masses, then only that is justified. So he also gave a lot of ethical ideas about how capitalism might work. What has happened over the years, that these ethical ideas have been completely compromised. So in the first phase, the idea was that capitalism probably gives you common good or enhances the common good. That's something that Marx also appreciated, that capitalism brings a lot of development, it unleashes human potential for creativity and all that. What happened in the second phase, the first crisis of capitalism in 1870s? That time, I think it was not a philosophical crisis. It was an economic crisis, this crisis cycle, in which they overcome that crisis cycle. But there was enough to reproduce, enough to innovate, so they innovated new technologies, they entered into new fields. But they also did two things, which gradually became symbolic of capitalism. One is colonialism, and other is war technology. This was very incipient at that time, which has overgrown by now, so I'll come to that. So in the second phase, 1929 crisis, still it was not so bad, as there could be reassertion of some people saying that you need welfare capitalism. Unless you have welfare capitalism, the market as an institution would collapse. So there are some ethics introduced by Keynesian economics, and a lot of people even today, including Prabhat Patnaik and the JNU School of Economics, they are asserting that probably the state will have to go back to that. My problem is that probably capitalism doesn't need that anymore. That's what I want to come, that probably capitalism has reached to the level that it will not go back to welfarism, and there are political consequences of that. For survival, yes. The third phase, 1970s, when first mutation took place, first philosophical mutation took place, and you see the shifting of the argument. So Hayek and Friedman, these philosophers, talked about capitalism and justification not in terms of common good anymore. I have quotations of them suggesting that the argument that they presented was about freedom. That capitalism brings freedom, socialism brings serfdom. That was the argument. And freedom then was defined as the neoliberal freedom without any restriction. I remember Hayek's statement that my freedom is so absolute that even your presence is a threat to my freedom. But in order to realize my 90% freedom, I have to forgo 10% of it. But then you don't say that you are giving freedom by taking away freedom. So actually, you are restricting freedom. So freedom has to be absolute. So freedom became the central argument in the second phase. And that's where we see the rise of the neoliberal economics. And that gradually penetrated all over the world, and that became the central argument of many of the states, that market will bring freedom, and this time it is the intervention from the state is no more Adam Smith's ethical intervention. It is more a kind of non-ethical intervention. That is, freedom is so absolute that this is your property, you can destroy it. That is, that the state can intervene on the behalf of the capitalist, not on the behalf of the labor. So there's a reform of the labor law. And the reform is absolutely against what Adam Smith suggested in his major book. So there's a mutation in 1970s, and that mutation is something that cannot go back to what we have thought earlier. Now what is happening is, and this is a deeper philosophical crisis, that the wealth is accumulated in few hands, and the two trends, one that military-industrial complex, and second, that concentration of wealth in some hands grew further. And then finally it has reached to this level that 1% versus 99% has come up. And now what capitalism is doing is securing its future through technology and security. Security discourse is part of that development in capitalism, where it is no more interested in the people at large. It no more has that kind of idea of the common good, or even the idea of the freedom. The both freedom and common good ideas have been dropped now. Now it is security, and technology is being used for enhancing that. So you have robotics and all, and there are symptoms more common in literature and films than in our social science discourses about these things. If somebody has watched the serial in Netflix called Black Mirror, which is a futuristic serial, but it tells us what is going to happen to us in future. Or if somebody has read recent French controversial novels like Submission or atomized by Olbeck, I think they are giving us some kind of vision that what future are we heading towards, and I think that is a major philosophical transition that is happening to capitalism. And this is, I think, a quantic mutation, and it will never come back. The same kind of idea of the common good in capitalism would never come back. So what we are facing today in these authoritarian regimes are not merely localized authoritarian regimes. It is a product of, it's a political consequence of this quantic mutation. Let's take it that way. So the struggle is not only that what will happen in 2019. The struggle is no more that. I think struggle is much larger than that. They will discover somebody or other to defend the current stage of capital, if it is capital, or if we are heading towards post-capital scenario in which we don't know what would happen. So they would discover somebody with strong state security, with military support to really control the masses. That is what we are heading towards. I know this is a very pessimistic picture of what is going to happen, but I'll take one more minute. So in this situation, what are the possibilities? I think that what Professor Mohanty indicated towards, there are a lot of experiments are happening on the ground about how do we reorganize our organizing principles of engaging with nature. Creative theory will have to engage with those movements to see what are the possibilities there and how we can bring them on the central stage and make that part of the movement for social transformation. That is what I think is a task. I can mention a few of them, and there are many Gandhian movements. I can see Anuradha already arguing about that. And there are many Gandhian movements. There are many movements like workers' cooperative movement in Spain. So we have to really engage with them seriously, to theorize them properly, to get out of them something core idea as an alternative organizing principle. Yeah, of course. And I think the last half a second that Savita is indicating was gender issue. I think what's happening in that is very interesting, that in this patriarchal world, in order to come out from our frustration, there is an enhanced mixing of sexuality and violence. And this Netflix serial has brought that so well that when the villain or the counter-hero or the hero is suffering from serious frustration in the public domain, he becomes very violent in his performance in sexuality. And probably that is what we are witnessing in the world today. Thank you very much.